welcome to the Explainer. You know, today we're actually going to dive into a bit of a startup ghost story. It's all about how a company with, get this, over $37 million in the bank, 30 locations, and the backing of some of the biggest investors out there could just vanish, seemingly overnight. Yeah, this is the story of CoHive. So let's actually start this at the very end, with the final words CoHive ever posted. This right here, this was the farewell note from what was once the biggest, and I mean the biggest, co-working player in Indonesia, right before it just disappeared. So how does that even happen? How does a company that was seemingly everywhere one day become a ghost the next? You know, a company that was just buzzing with hype, that pretty much defined an entire scene. And then, poof, it just stops. That's the mystery we're unpacking today. Okay, so to really get a handle on the collapse, you first have to understand the incredible, almost unbelievable speed of CoHive's rise. I mean, it didn't just grow, it absolutely exploded onto the scene. You see, CoHive was born from a really, really painful problem for startups in Indonesia. Think about it. Traditional office space was just way out of reach. It demanded these huge sums of cash up front. We're talking 12, 24 months of rent, which is something most new companies simply don't have. And their solution? Oh, it was brilliant in its simplicity. They offered everything you could want: private offices, shared desks, all on a flexible month-to-month plan. No more of those brutal long-term leases. It was exactly what the market was screaming for. And that brilliant idea? Well, it acted like a magnet for some seriously big money. We're talking over $37 million from major investors like SoftBank Ventures Korea and East Ventures. They were all betting that CoHive was, without a doubt, the future of work in Indonesia. So with that war chest of cash, they went on an absolute expansion blitz. At their peak, they were running around 30 different locations across 5 major Indonesian cities. Seriously, if you were in the startup scene back then, it felt like you couldn't turn a corner without seeing their logo. And you know what? The people absolutely followed that growth. This wasn't just empty office space, it became this thriving, buzzing ecosystem. We're talking over 9,000 members from more than 800 different companies. CoHive had become the vibrant, beating heart of the entire Indonesian startup community. And right here, you can see just how dominant they became. I mean, by 2019, they weren't just another player in the market. No, they were the market leader. They controlled nearly a third of all co-working space in Jakarta's central business district. They were, for all intents and purposes, on top of the world. But just as quickly as it all went up, the entire foundation began to crumble. The music, which had been playing at full blast, just stopped. And the collapse happened with absolutely breathtaking speed. The pandemic in March 2020, that was the first domino to fall. But just look at this chain reaction. A CEO steps down, locations are shuttered one after another, and then in less than 3 years, it's all over. Official bankruptcy. So you gotta ask the crucial question, right? Was the pandemic just a case of really, really bad luck, or was it simply the event that ripped the Band-Aid off and exposed the fatal flaws that were already hiding underneath? Let's take a closer look. All right, so their first fatal mistake, it's a classic one. Growth at all costs, without ever really confirming that the underlying economics were sound. They were signing these huge, long-term leases, betting that demand would never, ever stop growing. Their model had absolutely zero shock absorption, so when occupancy plunged, their costs stayed locked in, and every single empty desk just started bleeding cash. And the second mistake? A complete and total lack of diversification. CoHive's entire business model was built for a world where people packed into physical offices. When that world basically vanished overnight, they had no backup plan, no digital memberships, no hybrid options to pivot to. They were a one-trick pony, and suddenly the trick just stopped working. But look, this isn't just a story about failure. It's a really powerful case study, and hidden in all that wreckage are some critical lessons. So let's actually turn this into an actionable playbook for anyone out there building a business today. From CoHive's let's call it an autopsy, we can pull a pretty clear three-step framework for building a more resilient, shock-proof company. It really all comes down to knowing your numbers, building in flexibility, and you guessed it, never putting all your eggs in one basket. So what does validating your unit economics actually look like in practice? Well, it can be as simple as this: a basic profit and loss statement for a single unit. In this case, one desk, right? So if your average desk brings in, say, $200 a month, but it costs you $180 in rent and utilities, you've only got a $20 buffer. CoHive's big mistake was scaling to 30 locations before ensuring that that little buffer was healthy and robust enough to survive any kind of downturn. Okay, lesson number 2 is all about building a model that can bend without breaking. This means creating things like, say, digital-only memberships that generate cash even when desks are empty, or negotiating smarter leases with landlords that share some of that risk with you. It's all about having options when your main revenue stream takes a big hit. And finally, lesson 3, never, ever let one specific customer behavior determine your entire fate. You have to diversify early with things that don't rely 100% on your core offering. Sell access to virtual events. Or, like this slide suggests, leverage simple partnerships, like inviting a local coffee roaster to set up a pop-up in your lobby for a slice of the revenue. That's more income for you with zero upfront cost. Brilliant. CoHive's story is such a powerful cautionary tale about the dangers of chasing growth at any cost. And it leaves us with this really provocative question, not just for co-working, but for any industry facing disruption. In a world of constant, crazy change, is the ultimate competitive advantage just being able to survive? Something to think about. Thanks so much for joining us on The Explainer.